Well, no rain today. We're back to classic late summer weather. Cumulus popping up in the late morning and just dying out as we lose heating during the afternoon. Welcome to Meteorology Lab. It's August 30th, and let's take a look at the maps and go region by region. In the Pacific Northwest, kind of a quiet pattern, but we have onshore flow bringing in a marine layer into Washington and Oregon. And you can see it coming into the Seattle area right there and into Portland, and some of the stratus is banked up against the coastal range, kind of like what you see right here. Everything back in here is all stratus, and if we animate this, you can see the layers moving inland. And on the lee side, fair skies and warm weather in those areas. Also, another thing that we can see is fast flow. This little area of fibrous clouds, that's cirrus, indicating some sort of jet stream in that area. And even down in the Nevada and Utah area, we've got a strong westerly flow. Maybe a subtropical jet, possibly. I'm not sure. We'll take a look at the upper level charts and see, but in any case, we know that this area is not under a big high. It's under a fairly progressive pattern. And also we can see gravity waves in Montana around Kalispell, Great Falls, and Billings. Right in here you can see a little bit of altocumulus, maybe some lenticular clouds embedded in that, and that's also indicating the strong westerly flow. And there's a closer look at the Seattle area, and this is showing the marine layer, which has moved inland, and we've got quite a bit of broken overcast clouds in that area. This is all stratocumulus and altocumulus. In the southwest U.S., the monsoon has definitely died down compared to yesterday. However, it is still going strong out around Silver City, out into the mining areas of Arizona, and back into the Roswell and Truth or Consequences area right there. And we can just go ahead and roll that real quick. Looks pretty quiet early on, but you can see the clouds going up there in the Alamogordo area and in the higher terrain of western New Mexico there. And that gives us that monsoon activity. Okay, going into the northwest U.S., here's what it looked like earlier today. Lots of stratocumulus and cumulus forming during the morning hours. And this is destabilization with cold air advection coming in from Canada. And if we animate that, you can see the northerly flow in this area. And even into Michigan, they're picking up some northeasterly winds coming up off Lake Huron there. And further south, where the north flow is, where we find the leading edge of that, that's where the front is. Polar front helping to generate some thunderstorms in Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And then down in the southeastern U.S. this evening, we'll roll things back to the midday hours. And things are looking kind of interesting down in Florida. You can see the sea breeze. I'll just draw that out, coming together there in the Jacksonville, Ocala, and Orlando area. And there's another sea breeze around Pensacola right there. And if we animate this, pay attention to this area here, southern Georgia and the Florida Panhandle. Very unstable air mass coming together, and you can see that outflow boundary. In fact, two of them right there, that sea breeze picking up and generating many, many showers there in southern Georgia. And I think we've got a closer look at that. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Roll this back earlier today and look at southern Georgia. I'll make this go just a little bit slower. And you'll watch that come off the bottom of the screen right there. There's the sea breeze working its way inland, and this is just kind of like a big surge of very dense air, just kind of overturning the air mass in this area. And you can see the anvils, they kind of stay almost stationary, maybe a slight eastward drift. So they're really being undercut by that outflow. Initially it starts as a sea breeze, and as those showers go up, we get the cold pool generation, and those just that cold pool just surges northwest and it just overturns the air mass like you see there. And also down in southeastern Alabama, the same thing going on there. And that brings us to Texas. Definitely quieter in this area. We've got the upper level high starting to take over a little bit. Things earlier today, you can see the cumulus looks a lot less vertically developed. Here's the West Gulf sea breeze coming in through Houston, as it usually does around noon to 1 p.m. And you can watch that move inland, and you can see not much convective development, just a couple of isolated showers, but overall very weak vertical motion. A couple of areas just southwest of Junction, got a couple of showers going in that area, but that's pretty much it. It's a lot quieter than what we had yesterday. So that's something different we're doing, starting with the satellite. That gives us a pretty good grounding to what's going on, and maybe when we head to these charts, things will make a little bit more sense there. Okay, so we'll take a look at the synoptic pattern, and you can see a pretty good polar front system there in Manitoba. There's a cold front coming in North Dakota and Montana there. Associated warm front moving into the Thunder Bay area and western Ontario. Large area of warm air advection coming up from the Gulf up into Kansas, Nebraska, all the way up to Minnesota there. Here's our outgoing high pressure area, but that is affecting the northeast quite a bit there, pushing the polar front in through Virginia into Tennessee, kind of like that right there. So north of that front, got those northeasterly winds blowing in from Canada, keeping things kind of cool in that area. And we can look at those temperatures up in that area. 65 there at Buffalo, 65 at Burlington, Vermont, and 68 at Binghamton, New York, and even 70 coming off the lake there at Chicago. This is very cool weather, and it could certainly be 15 to 20 degrees higher. And up in Canada, you almost need coats going on into that kind of weather there, 50s and lower 60s. And also in the Seattle area, we can see the effect of that marine layer with temperatures around 70, very pleasant weather, bringing in that cool air with that northwesterly flow. And about the only place where it's really hot is in the high plains, 89 there at Denver and 90 at Rapid City. Take a closer look at the air mass, and this is our mesoscale chart, and this shows where our frontal system is. So basically that's the dividing line, and you can see the northerly flow there at Indiana and Ohio, Pennsylvania, and that contrasts with the much warmer and humid air down in Atlanta and Columbia. All right, let's go into our usual chart sequence there. SPC showing a couple of thunderstorm areas, but this has died down quite a bit also. We were talking about that frontal system back on Tuesday. Remember, we had all those storms up there in Illinois and Iowa, and we were talking about how that would push southward underneath that upper level high, and with that we get that decline in storm intensity. So they become more or less just air mass storms, and we don't have any of that strong shear helping to organize those storms. So that transitions from spring-like weather up in the north Midwest to more of a summer-like pattern there in Tennessee as those storms moved down in that area. So the upper level patterns, this is what controls everything. This is up at 34,000 feet, and we can see that very broad westerly flow there across much of the western U.S. And it does indeed look like we have two jet segments. And I haven't even seen this chart until now, and the satellite did reveal those cirriform clouds there indicating the presence of an upper level jet likely in that area. 50 to 60 knots there, it looks like 65 there at Salt Lake City, and then we've got that northern stream coming into Montana and into Ontario like that. So with the troughing out in the northwest U.S. and the ridging in the North Plains into Manitoba, in between, that's where we can expect to find a surface system. All we have to do is take those two areas and then place the jet, which is going to be roughly like that. And basically along that line in between the ridge and the trough, that's where we expect to find the baroclinic low. Now keep in mind this is 6 a.m. and almost certainly it's moved into Manitoba. In fact, we saw it doing that on the thickness chart there. But earlier this morning, this was the setup. And from that baroclinic low there in Saskatchewan, we can make a pretty safe assumption that there's a cold front extending southwest from that low and a warm front extending east or southeast from that low like that. So even without looking at the surface chart, we've got a pretty good idea what the surface front setup is like. And indeed, that did verify there on the thickness chart. And we can see up in Alaska, lots of energy coming in there from the northwest. Things are getting very active up in that area. And that's going to be the case over the next week or two, and we'll show you that to you on the GFS. Things are getting very interesting up there in Alaska and Yukon. And that's going to have an effect on the weather here in the U.S. in the next couple weeks there. Location of the subtropical high, let's check that out. Looks like we got a strong one off the east coast right around this area here. You can see that easterly flow coming into the Carolinas and then wrapping around that subtropical high into New York like that. Okay, so subtropical high up in that area, and let's see, we've got northerly flow in Florida. Okay, let's trace out that flow. Okay. So these are some little streamlines there. And I'm doing something kind of unusual here. Okay, so you've probably seen this kind of feature on some streamline charts. That's a deformation zone right there, and this is basically just kind of a zone that the winds are just kind of moving around, not into it, but around this zone here. This is what we call a col, a COL. So there's that flow coming off the Atlantic and then wrapping down into Florida. Kind of like that. And then up north of there, we've got that those prevailing westerlies moving up to the northeast U.S. right there. So by drawing these streamlines in that pattern, we've got a pretty good idea how things are situated in the upper levels. And let's see, anything else to go over? I think that's pretty much it. Not going to be anything much different in the mid-levels. We'll just go ahead and skip that for now. Pretty warm conditions there in the Rockies. And then the 850 chart will show the moisture supply. Looks like we've still got a little bit of a low-level jet in West Texas and western Oklahoma. About 30 knots, 30 to 40 knots with that in Amarillo and Dodge City there. And we can see the polar front. Very cold conditions up there in northern Illinois and Wisconsin. And I'm trying to read the number here. It looks like, I think 7. I don't know, that's kind of, those digits are stacked on top of each other, but in any case, we got some very cool conditions up there in the western Great Lakes there. Okay, so we can look at the moisture. This is the precipitable water, and we can see that there's been a pretty significant decline in precipitable water. We're only seeing about maybe 1 to 1.5 inches across much of the U.S. there, and it's in kind of a narrow band in Texas and Arkansas, and then northward into Minnesota there. The rich moisture is still down in the Gulf and has yet to move up into the southern U.S. there. So things are a little bit drier than what we've had over the past couple weeks there. Soundings, let's check out soundings. Where are they? Let's see here. Did I lose my soundings? I can't find them. Okay, let me look. Yeah, here they are. In fact, let me get the current soundings. So here's our plot there at Fort Worth, taken about an hour ago, and yeah, it's much drier in the low levels there. Starting out with dew points around low to mid 60s and tapering off into the 50s and 40s with height. So there's not really any way we're going to get storms going with that kind of sounding. LCL up at about 8,000 feet, and then lifted parcel is going to look something like that. So that's definitely negative Cape. The whole column there is capped, so no chance of storms with that. The only way we can improve on that is to get some better moisture in the low levels, and as we've seen, that's lurking off in the Gulf, and very weak southerly flow, just barely bringing any of that in. We can look at Atlanta ahead of that area of surging sea breeze storms. We know that the air mass there is pretty unstable. We don't have the current soundings, but we'll get this morning's and see what they look like earlier. And the sounding is showing convectively unstable, a little bit of dry air just off the surface, but dew points are a little bit better in the low levels. It also helps that the lapse rate from about 3 to 10,000 is pretty strong. That line, that temperature line, leans over to the left with height. Okay, I got to get my cursor back. There we go. Okay, so that's that steep lapse rate we're talking about. So if we try to, say, mix the low levels like that, bring the temperatures up to about 85. It's not super unstable, but we do get a little bit of Cape out of that. And very likely the moisture down in southern Georgia is probably a little bit better, because that's the only thing that would explain. Just looking at those storms, I think the profiles are probably like this. So just kind of working backwards, 85-degree temperature. The moisture is probably like what you see with that red line there. So very likely we've got lots of upper 60s dew points in southern Georgia there, helping to support the Cape and instability across that region. Okay, let's take a quick look at chat, see how things are going there. In fact, I should also check the frame drops. Looking much better there. 46 frames dropped. I think back on Tuesday we had GR level 2 running, and I bet that it was ingesting a lot of data from Davenport there that was probably messing us up there. JT, welcome to the webcast. Crystal Lake, New York, 65 over 57. Nice and cool there. David Lumbert in Little Rock, 85 over 71, broken cumulus. Erica Baker, Coffeyville, Kansas, 74 over 67. Got Funwood Tech here, and Burl H. Ryan Toomey's there in Florida. Mike R. out there in California, finally able to catch a live show. Got Shirley Keast up there in Michigan. Not feeling the best today. Sorry to hear that. Willie Greenway in Georgia getting some of that rain. Maybe not all the way up where you are, but it's very close. Ryan Toomey's watching the tropics. NHC does have a, let me see if I can bring that up. Yeah, they've got this new area near Cape Verde. However, like we talked about on Tuesday, where's that 2-day track? 5-day track. Yeah, they were sort of bringing this up kind of like that. So we could kind of see that coming by how far north that was, and very likely that's going to stay out in the Atlantic, but this is new. So a possibility of maybe a tropical depression or maybe a weak tropical storm moving into the Gulf. So that'll be something to look for there in the Florida area. Got Carl Berghoff here and Brian Lowe in Delmarva. Mike R. reporting it's one of the coolest days in San Francisco history. Highest temperature this summer. Okay, one of the coolest summers. 81 back in June was as high as they've seen. Marine layer in full effect there. We got right there in Tucson. Welcome. And Sue M. JT reporting bad echo. Let me see what's going on. And that's where I gotta look at this and figure out what's going on. Microphone. Yeah, let me know if that helps a bit. Okay. I think that's about all I can do for now. But I'm looking at this, and it's only piping the microphone into the audio going out, so we'll see what that does. Anyway, I'll have to look around on that. Carl Berghoff, looking forward to the Packer game. Surface and upper air charts, they're from many different sources. SPC, pivotal weather, surface is digital atmosphere, upper air is, I don't know, where do we get the upper air data from? Meteocenter.com. Center, C-E-N-T-R-E. That's got the British spelling on that. Okay, and Mike Estwick is here. So, yeah, let's go ahead and head into the forecast, see what's going on. Let me get my windows back the way they're supposed to be. And we'll bring up the model charts. So for the short term, for our area, pretty quiet. You can see the southerly flow coming up from the Gulf there. Things are very diurnal and very suppressed with that upper level high. And the only areas getting any significant rain are up there in the Ozarks. A couple of showers up in that area, and those will rapidly diminish after midnight. So the upper levels. So we're going to be seeing some changes over the next week. Just over the short term in the upper levels, there's that upper level high moving into West Texas, and that's going to reposition itself out into the eastern U.S. by the weekend. And you can see that the flow aloft kind of becomes southerly in Texas. So we're probably going to see precip chances come up a little bit. And in fact, it looks like there's a little bit of a depression there in the New Orleans area, so maybe some rain for that part of the Gulf Coast area. And there's also this vague troughing out west. So we're probably, that's going to mean cooler conditions aloft and probably more unstable conditions there in the Four Corners, New Mexico, and Arizona. So let's zoom things out and look at the GFS and kind of summarize things over the next couple of weeks. Strongly zonal flow coming in from the Pacific there. You can see the troughing there in western Canada. So moving into the weekend, you can see that troughing start to take hold there in the Four Corners area. So, as I mentioned, rain chances will be going up there in Arizona, and also it's probably not going to be as hot in that area. It is going to be hot out in Virginia and North Carolina with that subtropical high just kind of parked off the East Coast. And we're going to see a series of troughs come into the northwest and northern U.S., and here's one coming in for Monday. This one looks like it tries to dig in a little bit. We've seen a series of these troughs mostly grazing the northwest and then pulling up into the Hudson Bay and Ontario area. However, this one looks like it's really trying to dig in there for Wednesday. However, it only moves, I guess, through the Dakotas and then lifts up to the northeast once again. Here comes the next trough. This one's very weak for Saturday, the 8th. And you can see that not many of them make any progress into the southern U.S., so we're just going to be kind of seeing stagnant weather in this area. However, towards the very end, 312 hours out, September 12th, you can see this very strong polar express pattern get started up there. So this probably marks a transition to some very cool weather, at least for the northern U.S. This would be a very potent weather pattern in December and January. But we'll likely see temperatures about 10 to 20, maybe even 25 degrees below normal, possibly in this area right there. And another unusual feature is this big upper level low out in the Gulf of Alaska. Let's look at the surface systems. I know for those of you new to weather, this may be a little bit difficult to follow. However, the black lines, those are the isobars. Underneath we can see high pressure here, and I'll try to stop here and there and draw out the fronts. But let's see what's going to happen here. So over the weekend, big high. This is a big polar high covering the eastern Pacific there. So that's helping to push that marine layer into the west coast there. Also very strong southerly flow coming up from the Gulf. I wouldn't say strong. This is very broad and trying to think of an adjective. It's kind of a long fetch of southerly flow coming up from the Gulf. We'll say that right there. However, a series of systems starting to stack up there in western Canada. And here's one right there. And here's a very strong one coming into northern Alaska. So these are going to be basically moving into central Canada. So we'll move forward a few days here. You can see this concentric area of blue indicating a cold air mass moving into Northwest Territories and central Canada from Monday. And also a front coming into the northwest U.S. like that. So some cold air coming into Montana and Washington and Oregon for early next week. So things start looking a little bit different in this area. Large area of high pressure in Alberta and the Canadian prairies right in that area, and low pressure in the Dakotas. And we've got this front kind of like that around midweek. And in between, very strong northerly winds coming into Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. So this is probably one of the first big changes coming up around Tuesday or Wednesday, this cold blast coming in the northern U.S. And if it was November, January, or February, that would probably make it all the way into the southern U.S., but it's going to be kind of slow going moving south. The Midwest, however, and the Great Lakes, they'll definitely get some of this, and here's that cold air coming in. And then towards the end of next week, you can see this big high moving in. Looks like that front makes it down to possibly Oklahoma and Arkansas. See how big this high is. It's definitely got some muscle to it there. Pacific high, this is starting to undergo some changes. Starting to shift a little bit in position. Kind of like backing off a little bit, so we're going to watch that area too. And then towards the end of the sequence for the 11th and 12th, a really strong shot of cold air coming down from Yukon and Northwest Territories. And then we see that high there being replaced by this low out in the Gulf of Alaska. That big high that we had out in the Pacific has kind of disappeared. So that's kind of unusual for late summer when we see something like that. So that's probably going to mark some interesting weather coming up for September. So this next cold blast, let's see what happens. That's definitely going to push into the Great Lakes and north central U.S. And with this low out in the Pacific, I think that may mark a blocking pattern possibly shaping up for this area. So we'll see what happens with that. Also, as far as the tropics, let me back this all the way up. starting out tomorrow, you can see we've got this very deep flow from the tropics. So Florida getting some very, well, tropical weather there. But this is really bringing up the moisture into the southern U.S. And embedded in that, probably a couple waves moving through the flow. So chances of precip will continue for a while. And let's see. NHC, they are expecting something to develop in that corridor right there. And let's see what the GFS has got. Yeah, so here's one good easterly wave moving into Florida on Tuesday. There's another easterly wave right there. There's that other Cape Verde storm. That's not going to affect the U.S. most likely. However, the GFS is going a little bit conservative on tropical development out in this area. Even though sea surface temperatures are slightly high, the dynamical model just not really going for much. That could certainly change. But, yeah, even by mid-September, nice deep southerly flow in this area, bringing up the moisture and bringing in the easterly waves. And there's always a possibility one of these could get going. So we can't really totally write off tropical cyclones for early September. In fact, yeah, I see to the very end right there, that little area of disturbed weather that could mark something maybe for the Gulf around mid-month there. So we'll see. And wow, yeah, this Pacific system, this is 384 hours out, but assuming that this happened here, that would probably bring a lot of moisture into the northern Mexico area, West Texas, New Mexico, and those can bring some very significant rainfalls into the southern Rockies and West Texas as they come north. So we'll see about that. Anyway, yeah, September does look interesting, so we'll see what's going to happen next month. Not much going on now. Okay, just a quick look at chat there. Sean Body, hope I got your name pronounced right. You enjoy tuning into the videos. Current meteorology student there at FIU. And Marine Matt, so welcome to the webcast. And Mike Estwick here in the crickets. Oh yeah, that's cicadas. They're up in the trees doing their thing. Okay, and Shirley Keys, thank you. All right, y'all take care and have a good evening, and we will see you on Sunday. Bye-bye.